In this video, we're going to talk about what's really holding you back. And spoiler alert, it's not that you don't have enough time. It's not that you don't have enough money. It's not that the people around you fucking suck. It is actually these identities that are very normal and common across society. It's just kind of a social norm of how we're supposed to show up that is holding you back and keeping you stuck. A quick recap on what identity is before we dive in. All identity is it's made up of the beliefs that you repeat, the decisions you make or avoid making, and the evidence that your brain works tirelessly to collect to align with all of that. So all of your actions, all of your daily choices, everything you do in life, it will match who your brain believes you are. And the problem is, since a young age, we're socially conditioned into this existence of keeping yourself small, of not rocking the boat, of not being too much. And when you stay in those identities, you stay stuck. You're never gonna have a big fucking life if you keep operating from the people-pleasing identity, the self-sacrificing identity, and the permission-seeking identity. We're gonna cover all three of those, how they show up in your day-to-day, and how to start fracturing them in real time. So these identities apply to any stage in your life. Whether you're just sitting at home trying to figure out what your next goal is, or whether you are a successful entrepreneur, you're an ambitious human being who's like going after their big goals, but you keep hitting a brick wall. You keep getting stuck. You keep falling back into old patterns, and you can't seem to make any progress. So let's start with the first one, self-sacrificer. There's this idea in society that in order to be a good person, you have to sacrifice your own needs, which is complete and utter bullshit. Sacrificing yourself actually makes you less capable of helping people, of having impact. And this idea of this like mutual shared suffering keeps us all on an equal level is not how you're ever going to be satisfied and happy with your life. The problem with this self-sacrificing identity is it's deeply ingrained since childhood or when you have toxic family dynamics. Maybe you grew up with a bunch of siblings and your parents always wanted you guys to be on the same level. So if one sibling was whining and crying and complaining, it was up to the other siblings to kind of like sacrifice whatever it is they're doing, how they're feeling about their day to help out. Don't take this the wrong way where it's like important to care about people, but you can be a good person, you can care about people, you can show up to help others without sacrificing something from yourself. And I think a lot of this mentality comes from this idea that there's like a shortage of success. The truth is, if you have Wi-Fi and a smartphone, you have just as much advantage of anybody else in the world of getting filthy fucking rich, of finding your dream partner from any of those apps that help you find your dream partner, of creating meaningful friendships, of crushing every single one of your goals. If you think about it, you can access online education for free on this platform all the time to help you reach those goals. So what is the difference between people that do this and people that don't? Well, the people that don't are stuck in victim mentality, and victim mentality coincides with these three identities that we're talking about today. And in order to be a leader of your life, you actually have to take the initiative, which is why I don't believe in self-sacrificing. I look at it this way. If I have $100 and I need the whole $100 to reach my goal, but my friend comes over to me and she's always struggling and she just like can't afford groceries this month and she really needs $50 to get groceries for her and her family. What I could do is I could sacrifice my $100, my goal, and I could give her half of it, right? I could give her the $50. That would make me feel really good about myself. The problem is she's gonna go buy groceries with that, and then she's gonna end up in the same place again next month. When then I'm not reaching my goal. So I'm less capable of helping anybody, right? Now I'm just back to square one as well. What I could do instead is I could take that $100, say no to my friend, deal with the guilt that comes up in the moment, which we're gonna talk about in a second when we move into the people-pleasing identity. I can use the $100, reach my goal. Maybe my goal is to make $5,000 a month. Okay, I make that $5,000. I go and buy a whole bunch of groceries for my friends. I drop it off at her house with all this extra money I have. In both scenarios, I'm a good person. But in the first scenario, I'm limiting my capacity to have impact, to have help. And I'm only helping one person, where in the second scenario, whatever business I created, whatever purpose-led mission I have for myself, my life, my goals, I actually have increased my capacity to help hundreds and thousands of people all around the world. Maybe I take that $5,000 and I go and I use it to build out the food bank to help more people in my community. Do you see how if you shift this idea that in the moment you feel like you're being selfish for putting your needs first. If you look at it from more of a long-term vision, you're actually being selfish so you can have greater impact, so you can help more people. Now, self-sacrificing shows up in more ways than in monetary forms, right? Self-sacrificing might be you host the family Christmas dinner, even though you're burnt out as fuck and you don't really feel like having people at your house. You know that everybody's going to be happy when they're all surrounded, we're all eating food, but you're sacrificing your own health, your own physical and mental health to make sure everybody around you is happy. Another way that shows up really common is in motherhood, right? We always feel the need to like put everybody else ahead of us. And the truth is, you can take the 5 minutes. The house is not going to burn down. It might look messy right now, but sacrificing your 5 minutes to honor your own needs isn't actually bettering anybody in your life. You're going to show up resentful. You're going to show up grumpy. You're going to be miserable. You're going to be disconnected from your partner, disconnected from your kids, disconnected from your family. So self-sacrificing really does give you this short-term gratification, right? You feel like a good person in the immediate. But long-term, you have less capacity, less ability to actually make meaningful change, not only in your immediate family and in your immediate life, but worldwide. You will not be able to grow a big fucking life. You will not be able to have a purpose-led business. You will not be able to hold the amount of wealth and significance that you crave and desire. Like, I know if you're watching this video, you know that you're meant for more. So all of these identities that we're covering today, you're never going to have them more because they keep you stuck in this little box. The first way to fracture this self-sacrificing identity is getting really honest with yourself about what you need. And something really simple, a practice you can incorporate today and use throughout the day that works really well for every single one of my clients is before you go to do something for somebody else, or even have a timer on your phone to just check in throughout the day, just stop and ask yourself, what do I need right now? Not what's on my to-do list, not what do my kids need, not what does my boss need, not what my friends need. What do I need right now? And then I want you to honor that need before doing anything for anybody else. Let's say your boss comes to you and they're like, oh, I have this huge project. I really need you to get working on it right away. And they expect you to just drop everything you're doing in that moment and just like dive into whatever chaos they have in their own brain that really has nothing to do with you. In this moment, be like, yes, I'm interested in supporting you with this, but I just need a minute and then I'll get back to you. And take that moment to be like, what do I need right now before I throw myself into this energy, into this stress that my boss is literally projecting onto me that's going to actually help me fulfill my responsibilities as an employee, but still honor who I am as a person and increase my capacity to do a better job. The next one we're going to move into is the people-pleasing identity, and we're going to tie this into the guilt loop. Now, I have a whole video about the guilt loop, understanding the guilt loop in detail, how your nervous system and brain work and why it creates this sensation. So you can dive into that video too. I'll put the link up here. People-pleasing identities develop from childhood when we get the sensation that in order to feel valued, in order to feel loved, in order to feel that we belong, we have to make other people happy. We have to dim ourselves down. We have to fit into this mold, into this box for people to love us. We don't believe that we are worthy of love. We don't believe in unconditional love. And the reason I'm using we is because I've spent a lot of my life living in this people-pleasing identity. In fact, I became a drug addict at 16 years old because of this people-pleasing identity. I used to be very anti-drugs. I came from this family of addicts and abuse. And so when I had met my boyfriend in high school, he was using drugs and I was like, oh, I'm not going to use them. We would have fights all the time about him going out on the weekends and like we'd break up and get back together, break up, get back together. And then one night on New Year's Eve, he was like, you were just always judging us for doing drugs, but you've never even tried them. Like you've never even done them. And the people pleasing part of me was like, yeah, like I guess I do need to fit in. It's not really fair of me to like judge. And obviously not blaming my boyfriend for my choices, but I made the choice to try and consume drugs that night. My drug of choice was cocaine, and I immediately became addicted. I am talking immediately. Within 24 hours, I was searching my pant pockets for more. I had the best fucking night of my life. I thought everybody was my best friend. I was like, woo! And this is back in the days where like cocaine was actually like a real thing, not all the shit that they put into them now. Not that I have any clue what's put into them, but I do see the people on the streets and it's very concerning. But that people-pleasing identity, that idea that in order to feel loved, I needed to take on this new persona, it stayed with me for years. I was an addict for years until I had my first son and was able to put myself through recovery and sobered up and am the person I am today. The problem with this identity is you will literally shapeshift yourself in different situations. So maybe you show up at a family event as one person, you put on this kind of mask to keep everybody happy, to keep the peace, and then maybe you show up in your friends with like a completely different mask. And maybe that's your confident mask, but maybe you still have this kind of like, I got to keep my friends happy. I need to be the person to go to. I never say no to my friends. Then you show up at work as like the extra driven, like I will do anything. I will take all the shitty caseworks. I will sacrifice myself in every single way just to feel anything, really, to feel like you have significance, to feel like you have worth. The biggest problem with the people-pleasing identity is a lot of people who are highly emotionally intelligent fall into this. Because emotionally intelligent people, they can read people's emotions, right? You can read the room. You can step into the room and know exactly what's going on. Or maybe you have a partner and they're like, I'm not mad at you. And you're like, yeah, you fucking are. Like, I can tell. I can read your emotions. And so in order to please the person in front of us, we're reading their emotions, and then we try to like conform ourselves to make sure that everybody's happy, right? We're all just hunky-dory, happy. And the problem is we lose ourselves along the way. And it gets deeply ingrained in us that the only way that we have value, the only way that we have worth is if we are making other people happy, is if we are doing more. And that's simply not true. And like, I feel kind of emotional talking about this today, which I'm surprised, but I think I just spent so much of my life in this identity, and it really hurts me to see other people in this identity, because you are worthy. You were born enough. Every single part of you is just beautiful. And a lot of you is layered under these societal expectations, the trauma you've been through, the bad things that have happened to you, the stories people have said to your face or about you. And your brain just repeats them. Your brain loves familiarity and your brain loves repetition. But I need you to know that like you are enough. If we stripped away all of your titles, all of your promotions, everything you've ever accomplished in your life, you are still worthy of love. Okay? You need to know that. You are still worthy of love, regardless of how you're showing up. And I learned this actually a few years ago when I was on stress leave, burnt out as a child protection social worker. And my partner at the time, I was watching true crime shows, binge watching them, like trying to guess the crime before it happened. And my husband came home and he's like, what did you do today? And I cried. I was like, nothing. I felt so useless. I felt like I had no value. Like, just take me out to the trash. And he said 5 words to me that have forever changed my life. He said, I'm so proud of you. And I'm like, what the fuck? You're proud of me for doing nothing? I had never in my entire life been validated for doing nothing. And so a lot of my mission and a lot of my hunger to help other people really comes from that, because how many of us are sitting there thinking that if we do nothing, if we're not checking off the to-do list, if we're not making all the money, if we're not helping all the people, we have no worth, we have no value. Way too many of us sit with that. And so many people in the entrepreneur space, that's why we become entrepreneurs, because we have this sensation that we need to prove we are worthy. But you are worthy. So the best way to fracture this identity is to actually start talking to yourself in a way as somebody who is worthy. It's to neglect the tasks. I'm not saying let your house turn into a hot mess express, but it's about honoring your needs before you jump into those, okay? And it's also about setting boundaries. So the thing about guilt is when you set a boundary with somebody, and normally the first person you need to set a boundary with is yourself, like not taking on more than your nervous system and your body can actually handle. But when you set a boundary for the first time, if you haven't in a long time, you're going to get a sensation of guilt. You're going to get this feeling, and what you need to remember when that comes up for you is that it's just an alarm system from your body telling you that you are doing something different. It's telling you like, no, this is not who we are. We do not honor our needs. We sacrifice for everybody else, and we do not put ourselves first. And so once you understand that that's actually what guilt is, you can stop making it have meaning. It doesn't mean that you're good. It doesn't mean that you're bad. It just means that you're doing something different, and that's very uncomfortable for you because your brain doesn't like change. Your brain does not like to do things different. So make sure to dive into that guilt loop video, learn a bit more about that nervous system response, but that is the best way to fracture this people pleasing, is to start setting boundaries with yourself and start setting boundaries with other people. Now, the third identity that we all fall victim to is the permission seeker. And we come by this one so honestly. Since we're in grade school, you're 6 years old, you go into class. What do you have to do when you have to go to the bathroom? You have to raise your hand and ask for permission to literally do something that your body is meant to do. It is absurd. We have this permission-seeking identity ingrained in us right from school. And even if you were homeschooled, there's still elements of like, okay, well, you can't move on to this until you get graded for this. So we're taught not to trust ourselves from the beginning. We're taught that somebody outside of us has better information, and we're taught to ignore the sensation inside of our body that tells us what we're supposed to be doing. So in an adult, this shows up with always waiting. You're waiting to feel ready. Maybe you're consuming social media, you're consuming YouTube videos, you're listening to podcasts, you're reading books on a topic that you already know so much about, but you just don't trust your own voice enough to actually show up and start talking about it. You feel like you need more information. You feel like you need somebody to like look at your stuff and be like, yes, this is good. And there is definitely a place for feedback, and there is definitely a place to audit your own work. But when you outsource everything about you and you constantly are scanning the room to see if what you're doing is okay, you end up falling into the other identities, right? You end up falling into the people pleaser, and then you lose yourself, you lose your voice, and then you're like, I don't even know what to talk about anymore. Who am I? This is why we become so disconnected, not only with who we are, but with our purpose, with the direction we want our life to go, because we're literally waiting for somebody else to tell us, yes, you got a degree in this, which means you can have this job and then you can live this life. But this life requires you're only going to make $70,000 a year at this life, okay? And that's just not true. You can get the degree and you can use the degree to do whatever the fuck you want. You can get the job and the title, but the job and the title, they don't mean anything about who you are. They don't mean anything about what you're actually capable of. Sure, you can be capped at the income because that's how real life works when you're in a 9-to-5. Or you can take your skills like I did with child protection social work and mental health and psychology, and on top of working your job until you've grown your business enough, you can use those skills to actually create an income stream over here. And nobody needs to give you permission to do that. You are enough. Your experience, your passions, your knowledge, your stories, everything you've lived through has value. The best way I look at it is there is somebody living where you used to be. Right? You used to have a time where you hit a roadblock and you were able to overcome that roadblock, whatever that was in your life. Well, there's somebody currently living your old reality, and you were able to come out on the other side of that. That is the permission to help. That gap right there where they are and where you are, that is the permission. You need to start giving yourself permission. And so what I want you to do to fracture this identity is when you're putting off a task or when you're trying to learn more information, let's say you're writing a book. We'll use the example of writing a book. You're writing the book and you're like, okay, no, I think I need to learn a little bit more about this topic. So let's just put this on the back burner for another year because I don't know enough. When you're doing that, I want you to come back and take action instead of putting it off, and then ask somebody that you trust to audit your work. Ask somebody that you trust, but take it with a grain of salt. If you find somebody that's actually good, like an actual true mentor that's a leader and knows how to build other leaders, they're not going to just give you feedback and be like, oh yeah, you should do X, Y, and Z if you want to, sell 1 million copies of this book. No, they're going to ask you questions. And they're going to get you to pull it out inside because they know if they're a good leader, the answer is already inside of you. That's why a lot of people, when they dive into business, they dive into all these strategies and like, oh, if I only had this 5-step framework, that would push me forward. That's not the truth. That's not going to push you forward. That's why so many people waste so much money in courses and frameworks and all these things, and they never see the result from them because you're outsourcing what you already know and it doesn't actually fit for you. So start to ask yourself better questions and use your own brain, your own body to audit the work you're doing. You will be so surprised the answers you come up with. Sometimes when I feel very stuck in my business, instead of sitting at my computer to just start working away and grinding and hustle and hopefully my brain will turn on, I will sit on my couch, I'll grab a cup of tea, and I will just journal my thoughts. And I will just journal the things I know about the topic. I will journal how I think it's going to help other people. That is literally how I come up with these YouTube ideas. These are not scripted. I don't sit down and write them out and try to figure out what I'm going to say. I literally talk about what do I know the most about and how can I provide more value to others? You have all the permission. You just need to start giving it to yourself. You need to make a decision about what you want to do and just move towards that decision. These are the top 3 identities that are holding you back. And if you don't start fracturing these, each and every single one of them, you are never going to see the future that you desire. I'm going to leave some resources below, including the link to my Limitless Identity Live. It's a 2-hour immersive experience where we start fracturing these identities in real time and we safely transition you into the identity that you were destined to be. It's not a masterclass, you're not taking notes. It's actually an experience where we're going to rewire your brain in real time. So check out that link below. I would love to know, out of these 3 identities, which one you are most dedicated to fracturing immediately. I would love to know if you want to dive deeper into how these were formed, if you need a little more information on the actual family dynamics and structures that shape these. So let me know below in the comments. As always, I have an unwavering belief in your potential, and I wish you nothing but success.